Harold has already welcomed our new board members, and I certainly want to extend that warm welcome to the guys that are here today. I think we're missing one or two, but we're glad to have you guys and looking forward to getting to know you guys better, working with you, rolling up our sleeves, going to work, pushing the state of Texas to the forefront of higher education in this great state and this great country, and become a national and international leader in higher education. That's item one. Welcome in the committee's chair of the meeting overview. There's not a lot of agenda items today, and we'll go through them fairly quickly, but certainly feel free to answer any questions that should they come up. Item agenda 2, consideration of adopting of minutes of the June 22nd, 2011 Committee on Closing the Gaps meeting.
I'm going to move approval, and then I'd like to discuss.
There's a motion been made, and there's a second. Now we're going to open it up for discussion.
Being new to this committee and trying to read minutes, sometimes there's things that are in these action items that are really important that don't come out necessarily in the minutes. Is there anything, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that historically being new on the committee, that's decided upon any big items in here? Anything that you want to really drill down on as new members?
Yeah, we use on purpose sort of an outline form to the minutes so that they're more succinct, and the motions, though, are documented. You'll note that because we were short on board members at the time, I had to serve as a voting member, which ordinarily I'm an ex-officio member. So that's one observation, is that a lot of the motions were either made or seconded by myself. Judy, what do you think? Are there any particular issues that you would highlight?
No, this was just really the continuation or final part of our work. In the past, when this committee, and we take this 5 years back, there was when Closing the Gap started in 2000 and moved forward, there was much that the Division of P16 initiatives was engaged in terms of utilizing the funds appropriated for college readiness, et cetera. And so we are now at the end of that era, so that what we have here are just some little finished products that had to be done, and so there was nothing major on this agenda. What we are doing now, and why we really only have 2 agenda items, is because much of the work, in fact all the work that will be finished out in this next 2 years had been previously approved by the committee way before this last meeting. And so I can certainly provide you to make this, to bring you up into speed where we are, is at the next meeting I could do a little overview that might help you understand from where we came to where we are, and what brings it to having a smaller amount of items on a board committee meeting.
Judy, I think that there's a large number of new members on this committee, and I'm not sure.
It's all rookie except for you.
Yeah, I think it's just about everybody here is new. So if it's okay, would you be willing to prepare that perhaps for the last meeting?
Most certainly.
And perhaps get that information to them beforehand, give them the opportunity to read it and call in, ask questions, and then we'll certainly have a presentation at the next board meeting to try to give them some institutional history in terms of what's taken place in the past and where we're at now, and kind of what is left to be done.
Be glad to.
So I think that would be a good idea, David. Thank you for bringing that up.
And let me also explain that it isn't that we have finished our work, it's just legislatively our budgets have been cut, but much work is still continuing, not only on this side of the House, but also on the public ed side of the House. So we have some joint efforts that we are connected with. It's just that it did not necessarily require committee approval for this work to be enacted. It's what's brought us together as we move forward. But I'm certainly more than willing to do that, to give you a little background, and as we go from there into the next 2 years, it will help you.
You might say a lot of these things have gone from planning, debate, development, and launching into where it's now all about implementation and execution on a lot of these strategies. So a lot of what this committee gets is the monitoring and the updates on how are these strategies performing, and where are we in the pipeline of getting these things done.
And we have a date with Destiny in 2015.
Yes.
So the question is this an ongoing, moving 10-year target where we'll have another 10 years and there'll be another
Well, that's a
program, or what?
great question, and the anticipation is, and the board last year did some strategic visioning to we outlined a framework for what we hope will become the next long-range strategic plan for Texas higher education with the year 2030 as the tentative target, another 15-year period like Closing the Gaps was. So it would pick up where Closing the Gaps leads off, and instead of Closing the Gaps, whose goal was to bring Texas to what I'm looking for. Parity, thank you. My vocabulary, it's been a long meeting. To parity with our peer states, we anticipate that the next 15-year period will be about taking Texas to international, global competitiveness and being a leader.
With that strategic planning session, was there a report or an analysis?
Absolutely.
Have we been given that materials? Did I get that at
If it
orientation?
wasn't in your
It
note,
was in your orientation file, the FSG.
should have been.
USB drive? Okay, I'll look for it when I get home.
If you can't find it, though, staff will get you either a separate link or a separate copy, because it's definitely one of the key things I think every new board member should review. For that matter, us old board members.
It's also on our website, but the reality is that if the new members would like to even just sit down with us at your convenience, we'd be glad to discuss it at any length you want to. I mean, it's important that you understand it, or even do it by telephone if you want.
In the spirit of your earlier discussion, I'd like to do it online.
It's on our website.
It's on the website, but it should be on the
Ask any of us
disc.
questions by email.
The question I would ask is send me a link, because I don't have the patience to search websites, but
Members,
that's just me.
I think one of
You want the long division?
the most important documents that you might want to look at is where our goals and where our benchmarks were and where we're actually at. And you can see where we've met our targets and the areas that we're not. And, of course, that, I think, will let you know where our focus is over the next couple of years in terms of where we're trying to move up to meet those targeted areas.
I just wanted to add, when we just recently went through the sunset review, the first phase of the process, you don't realize how much work a staff and an agency have done until you see the 45 pages that only make up 1 year of work out of the division of P16 initiatives. And I think Dr. Gardner had asked us for some data not too long ago in terms of expenditures within a certain time frame, and it added up to $52 million. So it's amazing how much has taken place and where we've gotten to the point where we know where things are beginning to work and where we had to improve upon things in order to reach that magical number at 2015. So.
Let me make a quick comment in terms of how I'd like to organize our meetings, if it's not inappropriate or improper at this time. Judy is responsible for preparing the preliminary agenda, and she'll discuss it with me. And then I want to make sure every member of this board has an opportunity, if there's something that they think that they want to talk about, that we post that on the agenda in a timely enough fashion where we can discuss it. Judy, do you have a problem with that? Because
And I'll tell you what we have done just recently, which helps me in terms of preparing the agenda. Before the agenda is routed down to my immediate supervisor, which is Dr. Gardner, it's discussed with the chair, so that this way we have an understanding that this is what is wanted. Plus, at the same time, what we've written up, do you really understand it? Because if the chair isn't understanding it, then the rest of the committee members may not understand the item. So I try to get it completely clear, and then it starts the process through the approval chain here at the agency.
And in reality, in terms of the way the staff works, as the board changes, as new members are added, some of the way we do our work changes to mold itself to the new composition of the board and its desires. So as we go forward over the next 6 months, what we bring to the committee may be somewhat different than it was last year or 5 years ago, based upon what you guys have the most interest in. So it's really important, that you understand and we understand what you really want to spend your time on.
That's why I go to the chair first, so that I know what you want, and then I'm not having to come back after I've already routed a process and I have to completely change it.
Bill is really doing his job, and he's asked me to rephrase that comment I just made with the concern of the individual board members having an opportunity. And I appreciate, Bill, that's what you're here for. Is if there's an individual topic that you guys that you think we need to talk about, then get it to the commissioner, and the commissioner will then handle it in such a way that we can get it on the agenda and we won't violate any of the Open Meetings Act. That's the purpose of what we ultimately want to accomplish. My simple comment is that I don't want to define the agenda each and every board meeting. I want to be able to be flexible enough if there's something that you have a question about or you want to discuss, that it's on the agenda so we can talk about it. And, of course, we have to talk about it and meet all those requirements of the Open Meetings Act. So if there's something that once you get that you feel like that needs to be added, then bring that to the attention of the commissioner, and then he'll handle it in the way that it needs to be handled. Let's go to item 3, if we could. Update on Okay, I'm sorry. Point of information?
Yeah, I think you need to take a vote on approval of the minutes.
Okay. I entertain a motion that we approve the minutes.
You got a motion and a second already.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Agenda item 3 is update on the implementation of end-of-course assessments and setting the college readiness performance measures on English 3 and Algebra 2. Dr. Chris Clout, Associate Commissioner of Assessment and Accountability at the Texas Education Agency, and Dr. Gloria, don't ask me to pronounce that name, Deputy Associate Commissioner of Student Assessment at the Texas Education Agency, will present this item, and I think they're not here.
No, they were retained at TEA by their commissioner for a meeting, but in spite of the fact they could not come, Lynette Heckmann, our Director of College Readiness within my unit, has been working very closely with TEA, and I asked her to give you a quick update.
Thank
so
you.
you could still have that information.
Good afternoon. Dr. Clute and Ms. Ziskowski had a meeting this afternoon and said that they would be happy to postpone their presentation until another time, so we've invited them to come back perhaps in December. So what I plan to give you is just really a brief update, especially for you new board members. Back in 2007, during a special session, the legislature really created the college readiness agenda for the state, led in large part by our commissioner. And that created a joint relationship that we have with TEA in working on a number of issues that span both public education and higher education. And one of those is with regard to assessments. The end-of-course assessments, which were created during the 2007 session and have been changed a little bit in each of the subsequent sessions, now have in English 3, which is typically the junior year of high school, and Algebra 2, which is a 10th grade or 11th grade course, now have on their end-of-course assessments a college readiness measure. Now, that is to be set, that performance measure, in other words, what it takes for a student to be college ready, will be set jointly by our commissioner and the Commissioner of Education. So we had asked TEA to give you another update, which they did in 2009, but most of you folks are new members. So it was actually going to be somewhat a repetition of that information about end of course and the college readiness performance measure standard setting. And that standard setting, so that you know, is going to occur in February 2012. Now, TEA has a lot of work that they have to do individually and jointly with us. A number of studies have been ongoing, looking at various assessment instruments, ACT, SAT, benchmarking the end-of-course assessments against those assessments, as well as looking at what's going on internationally. In addition, they were charged to study current college students in Texas, so to benchmark those college readiness performance measures against what students are doing in college now. So we're in the midst of a joint project with college students wherein they will take the English 3, which is really 2 assessments. It's reading and writing, and Algebra 2, and about 4,500 college students, freshmen, will be taking that assessment this fall. And based upon that information, as well as the assessment information from the other various tests, they will do an analysis. They have a technical advisory committee that works with them, assessment experts from across the nation, who help them look at all of this information, do the analysis, and then this committee will present back to TEA for presentation to our commissioner and the Commissioner of Education the information for actually setting that college readiness performance measure. Again, all of this is happening. They've performed a number of studies already, but the college students taking the exams occurs, well, it's occurring right now. They're taking it over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and so that analysis will be done this fall with that standard setting to occur in February. So that's kind of in a nutshell what's going on with the end-of-course assessments and our work with TEA around those assessments.
By way of providing some background to the new board members, what Lynette is describing is one of the distinctive characteristics about education in Texas. We have a much closer relationship between higher education and public education in Texas than is typically the case around the country. For example, one of the things that we did, which I think it was really in some ways revolutionary, is when we developed our college and career readiness standards, they were done jointly by higher education faculty, university and community college faculty working together with high school faculty in the 4 key disciplinary areas: math, English language arts, social studies, and sciences. Most states have only ventured to develop college readiness standards in 2 areas: English language arts and math. And they've typically been done by K through 12, and then higher education has been brought in after the fact to tweak the standards. We developed them jointly from the very beginning. And I think our standards are stronger as a result. It's been part of our legislative strategy to make sure that that statutes that are passed that have ramifications for higher education, that the legislation read that the Higher Education Coordinating Board and TEA will work together to address the issues specified in that particular piece of legislation. So I think that's one of the things that you need to know about, that we work very closely with TEA. I have lunch on a regular basis with Robert Scott, the Commissioner of Public Education. The staffs work regularly together, and I think that that's one of the reasons that we've made some substantial progress on our mutual goals of improving educational attainment in Texas, because we've been working closely together for a good while.
Is part, and then either of you could answer this, is part of the purpose to studying the college students to determine what was able to be predictive of their ability to be ready on day one? Is part of what you're trying to do is to develop a testing instrument at the high school level to say, okay, you're ready now, and we can predictably, reliably know that you're going to be ready. You, depending on how motivated you are, you may or may not finish, but at least you're ready to start
Yes.
at the university level.
Yes, that's the purpose. And speaking to the college and career readiness standards, that was really that's kind of the linchpin for all of the work that we've been doing around college and career readiness with TEA. They took those standards. The State Board of Education was responsible for incorporating those standards into the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, which is the K-12 curriculum. So that was one of the pieces of this. Then the assessment folks over at TEA were responsible for taking that information in the curriculum and making sure that the assessment measures the key pieces of the texts that are relative to college and career readiness, especially on English 3 and Algebra 2. Another piece of this, speaking of the science and social studies, legislation requires that TEA, jointly with the coordinating board, look at science and social studies to see if it makes sense to have a college readiness measure on the end of course assessments or assessments in those areas, to see if it makes sense to have a college readiness measure on those two content areas, which would be completely different than what's going on nationally.
So that has yet to be decided?
There's studies that are going on, yes.
And I've been, in my conversation with Robert Scott, I've been pushing for that. Because, frankly, one of the challenges, and I know members of the board have been frustrated for years, as we have been, one of the biggest challenges we have in higher education is measuring learning outcomes. And the reason it's so much more difficult in higher education than K-12 education is because there are essentially an infinite number of permutations in the curriculum that a particular student takes. So when you can take a combination of 100, 200 courses to achieve a major in a particular field, how do you develop a learning assessment that applies to students across the board? Well, one of the reasons I think it's very important for us to have end-of-course exams across the 4 key disciplinary areas and be able to measure college readiness is we can use those as our benchmark and measure how much students learn in college on top of those end-of-course exams. And we know that at some point we have to be able to demonstrate how much students have learned during the acquisition of a baccalaureate degree. And right now we have very little information about that, and there have been books that have appeared recently, like a book that has received an awful lot of attention called Academically Adrift, which argues that students learned virtually nothing the first 2 years of college. And those concerns keep popping up, and we don't have any reliable response to those kinds of questions because we don't have good instruments.
How's your success at convincing Commissioner Scott that he ought to include those other two?
Well, his attitude right now is let's get English and math right, and then let's look at the other two. Well, I think we'll be able to do it. Of course, the problem with science is you've got 3 distinct disciplines that you have to develop an assessment for: biology, chemistry, and physics. Social studies incorporates history, political science, civics, geography, and some other disciplines. So it's more difficult to measure what students should know, but I think we'll pursue it.
So you use the word college and career. The criticism I have heard from people involved in chamber activities is that I don't have people graduating that are ready to do the job that I need them to do. And this is coming out of the high schools, or they don't have the ability to get in and do a technical degree because they're not ready. Will we also be involved in coordinating that activity for technical colleges?
I think that I think once the college and career readiness standards are implemented statewide, in at least 90% of the school districts, I think we'll be able to respond to that criticism. If they meet those college and career readiness standards, they should be ready to either do post-secondary academic work, career and technical education, or go into the workforce.
Will there be two standards, one for college, one for career?
It's all the same.
No,
They'll be the same.
comprehensive.
In the work that the division has done, and you can interject anytime, Lynette, because Lynette has been here longer than I have, but in the work that the unit has done with TEA, in answer to your question, what we know is that when you complete high school, regardless of what track you're going, whether it's post-secondary to complete a 2-year associate's, a 4-year degree, or you're going directly into technical training, it requires the same level of skill to be successful in those entry-level courses. The reading level, we have lexiled and studied the textbooks in the technical field as well as in the core subject areas, and it requires skill above 12th grade. Those books are not written at 9th and 8th grade level. And so what we're saying is no matter what you want to do, you must complete high school with the requisite ability to make the choices to go into that career track or directly into a 4-year track. And we've done studies, we've looked at syllabi to even look at what is it that professors, instructors are requiring of students, the kinds of assignments, the kinds of writing assignments, et cetera. So it's almost like a science of what has taken place in order to be able to say without question, with these college and career readiness standards that are infused in the K-12 curriculum, that this is the benchmark that says you must be here to make that next step. And
So the answer to this criticism is that the science has been studied and says if you don't meet that standard, you won't be prepared for technical college or for a university experience.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, that's a little bit different, and I'm not sure that the public necessarily understands that particular statement.
I think you're right.
Because the perception is now we're getting everybody ready to go to college.
No.
No, we're getting everybody ready for their choice of technical or college, but they have to be at the same ready point.
And I've come to realize in talking with a number of people in business that some people in business unfortunately don't consider those technical programs college, though they are.
Right.
So that's where we've been sort of missing each other in the communication, and that we're preparing students for, both technical fields, universities, transfer programs, or to go directly into the workplace. But you will hear them talk about, say, welding. That is at a college. They still need to be able to read the manuals, and there's just a wide range of welding techniques and types of welding, and many welders have very high skill standards.
It's probably the most common misunderstanding that exists between the higher education community and business, and what industries think we're emphasizing in terms of state policy versus what we really are. And it boils down to the semantics of what we mean by college going. That's why we call them the career and college readiness standards. And it also is part of the messaging that Gentex is helping us change that perception, that we're talking about all post-secondary attainment and not just what most of us envision, which is the traditional 4-year experience. The thing that would help take this a step further, whether it's the Texas Workforce Commission or other resources, is employers need to do, we as employers, we at our industry groups need to do a better job of helping define, not just tomorrow, but 5 and 10 years from now, what are the number of certificates, associates, and bachelors we need. Georgetown's done a good study that says 63% of all jobs nationwide will require some form of post-secondary attainment. But as a state, we're better able to plan and align resources if we know, okay, well, and in Texas, I think the number is more like 58%. But so what is that breakdown between the bachelor's level, the associate level, and the certificate level? And I don't know that we can say that today with a high degree of certainty, but that's kind of the next step we need to take in this conversation is defining that. and then getting over the semantics battle by how we message what we mean by college.
Part of that, we learned in working with Complete College America that at the national level, we apparently are one of the few states that in their plans have been counting certificates as a college success, certificates acquired in community colleges. And one of their recommendations was that states count those. Well, this board has been counting those in closing the gap since its adoption in 2000 and was recognizing them clearly well before that. So I think Texas has been different in the regard it holds for those certificates and the importance of those certificates to the success of the state.
Could I add just a couple of comments about what we're doing in terms of the career readiness piece of this? There are some activities that our colleagues in the academic affairs area, Dr. Stevenson's group, they have responsibility for a lot of the career tech programs. And they have a number of initiatives that they're doing wherein they have challenged institutions and provided some funding to incorporate the college and career readiness standards in their work. So that's one of the things we're trying to do to make sure that the career and technology degrees, certificates and degrees that we're offering have that component combined so that they are paying attention to these college and career readiness standards. Another piece of this, and we'd be happy to give you a set of the standards themselves if you'd like to look at them. There's a fifth set of standards, and this was determined by the committee, the vertical teams of higher ed and public ed folks that put these things together to create cross-disciplinary standards that go across all four content areas. And we took it upon ourselves to do an analysis of those standards with some of our career and technology courses and programs to see if what's included in those cross-disciplinary standards are the kinds of things that career and technology courses and programs require. And the analysis was amazing because there was almost 100% alignment with the expectations in those standards and what career and technology courses and programs expect of students. So we're trying to do some things here that address the career piece of this career and college and career readiness standards.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I just want to
David.
give one piece of additional context, and we probably should go into more detail at another meeting, but those of you new to the board may not be familiar with developmental education and that there is an exam to determine if one hasn't qualified by other means, whether one needs to go into developmental education or not. And there was legislation coming out of this past session that will be causing staff to address what that standard will be, what tests will be used to that end. And so it is really directly connected to what you're talking about, in that this is talking about a college readiness standard, but staff and working with institutions are going to have to determine if we need to set a new standard or adopt a new exam that in fact reflects these very same standards at the higher education level. Now, with what we have now, there are exemptions based upon, SAT scores, ACT scores, and I anticipate that there will probably be some exemptions related to the end-of-course assessments. But I just wanted to alert you that you're going to be hearing about that in the future and that these are really connected items, though this has been going on for several years now.
Yeah, those end-of-course exams will be used by high school students coming directly into higher education, but we have to have another assessment for those students that have either been out of high school for a while, or adults, or students coming from other states that haven't had the benefit of the end-of-course assessments. So we have some work to do in terms of another assessment or set of assessments that appropriately reflect the college and career readiness standards and assess students at the right level who don't have the benefit of taking the end-of-course exams.
I would like to make a comment, if I could. We're talking about what secondary education is doing in terms of evaluating their end-of-course assessments, but and we've tackled and we've wrestled with how we're going to evaluate student outcomes in our institutions of higher education, are we approaching a point where we can begin to decide how we're going to do that?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Gardner on that.
I mean, if the point, let me, Dr.
I'm on the
Gardner,
college readiness cusp.
I want to
so-
make a point just a second. If they see the need to do this in secondary education, and I understand it may be somewhat more complex in higher education, but why shouldn't we see the need to do it in higher education? Can I make a brief example? Let me give you an example. When I was at the University of Houston taking organic chemistry, we took a national final at the end of the second semester. We took organic 1, we took organic 2, and the second examination, the final examination, was cumulative over both semesters, and it was administered by a national agency, and it gave everybody a means, and this was 35 years ago, of evaluating if you sent a student to the University of Houston and they took organic chemistry, what chances did they have to come out making or scoring higher on the examination? Or if they went to pre-med through the University of Houston compared to the University of Texas, and you had end-of-course examination on those basic pre-med requirements, students and parents could look at those results and decide where they could send their students and have the best chance of being successful in that type of curriculum. We're not doing that, correct?
No, but Dennis, if you'll recall our work with FSG, that was one of the key things that former Chairman Ryder wanted to be sure we included in the development of our next long-range strategic plan. And so between now and 2013, 2014, that is exactly one of the objectives and one of the challenges we need to tackle.
Oh, thank goodness.
How we define that and how we measure that as we go forward towards 2030. How do we effectively, simply, objectively, and accurately measure learning outcomes?
It's part of transparency, letting students know what institutions they can send their students to and what their track record is if they do send their students to that. I'm sure he said it, and I probably just missed it, but I'm glad that
It's in there.
I'm glad we're well on our way to addressing that issue.
It's in the cost efficiency report, too,
Okay.
as a longer-term recommendation.
Thank you. So we're working on it.
We will, yes.
Okay, good. Any other questions? I think this doesn't require any action at this time. It's an information item only. Thank you for stepping in in the absence of TEA. You did a wonderful job. We'll move on to item 4A. It's consider of adoption or adopting the staff recommendation to committee relating to the approval to issue a request for proposal regarding technical assistance to new and continuing adult education innovation guarantees. Dr. Judy Loredo, Assistant Commissioner of P through 16 Initiatives, will present this item. Judy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I would like to recognize 3 individuals that are in the audience, especially one of them who just joined us a week ago. After an extensive search and 103 applicants, we now have a Director of Developmental Education, and she is in the back of the room, Dr. Suzanne Morales-Vale, who comes to us from Central Texas College with a long history of experience in developmental education as well as even working with the legislature. So I wanted to recognize her. And Terry Daniels, who is sitting right next to her, is the Assistant Director of Developmental Education. And the next item that we're going to be speaking to comes through the work of Dr. Linda Munoz, who is our Director for Adult Basic Education. And Linda, you might want to come close because I know there's going to be some questions on this item. Thank you. Currently, and there's the blue page goes into greater detail of what we are asking for your approval to do in releasing an RFP. There are currently 14 programs that are focusing on adult basic education, and 11 others working to not only addressing adults in their training, but moving them into that pipeline of workforce. So we're doing two things. It's working with adults who want to go into that pipeline of post-secondary for college training, getting degrees, and those that we want to get into that immediate workforce track. Dr. Munoz is the only person in our division that is working with all of these projects. We have received funding last year, the last biennium, and we have received an additional funding in this biennium under Rider 40 to continue our work in adult basic education. It is a challenge because many of our students that are commingled in developmental education are truly students that belong in adult basic education training, that are below that 2-year level of gap that you could move them into a pipeline. That doesn't mean that later on they certainly could not pursue a 4-year degree, but we need an employable workforce, and there's so many people out there who with some basic training, 8th grade level skills, could get out there in the workforce. Linda has been overseeing these projects for us over the last 2 years, but I don't need to tell you the daunting task that it is for one person to travel the state, to monitor these projects, to make sure that they are meeting the RFP that was written and the deliverables that they must deliver in order to achieve what the legislature has asked us to do. This request is an RFP to put out to get support and technical assistance for these projects so we can have that extra support out in the field to work with them. We have a short timeline. We've got to report to the legislature in the next 2 years what our gains have been and what we have done to be able to separate this population. At the bottom of your blue page, you will notice what the RFP will stipulate. And I think there were some questions as to whether or not we are going to incorporate the use of technology, the technology platform, which was a very good recommendation. And so, Linda, I don't know if you want to come up in case there's more questions. We will put out the RFP based on the criteria that you note here and anything else that you might recommend. That RFP will go through the reading process of the agency because it goes through legal to make sure that all the language is written as it should be. And then we will post it with a minimum of 15-day posting. The proposals then come in. We will identify, Linda will identify the internal and external readers to identify who will be the individual that receive the grant. It is a 2-year technical support grant. As you've noted on your blue page, it will be $375,000 per year working with all of those projects, institutions that have been funded. We will be giving you updates each year. The second year continuation will be based on success of that first year of technical support. We don't automatically just give you that money and say, now just do the work. You are monitored to make sure we're getting from you what we have asked you to do.
This is a critical issue. We have to separate the students, and they're mostly adults. They've been out of school a while, and many of them are reading at the 3rd and 4th and 5th grade level. And we put those students in the same classes with students who need developmental education, which is defined as being within 2 years of college readiness. And there's a big difference between reading at the 10th grade level and reading at the 5th grade level. And because we have no other pathway for those adults, we put them in developmental education. What happens way too many times is everybody fails. So we've got to come up with a different program for them. We're not going to abandon them. We do want to give them sufficient academic skills to be employable at a living wage, but clearly what we're doing now doesn't work. So this is a huge issue in Texas. We have, last data I looked at, 2 million functionally illiterate.
Well, 3.8 million eligible for adult education.
Yeah,
Adult basic education.
and about 2 million functionally illiterate adults in Texas.
And would you use the college and career readiness standards?
No. No, we need to, as Judy pointed out, we need to create a separate pathway for them. Most of these individuals are, as I said, they're adults. They're typically mothers with in their late 20s, early 30s with small children. They need jobs. It's unrealistic to set your goal that they're going to get a GED and then they're going to get an associate's degree and a baccalaureate degree. They need jobs to help support their families. And we've heard over and over again from people in workforce development that the minimal level of academic skill that they need to hold down a job that pays a living wage is 8th grade. So we want to get them up to 8th grade. That's our immediate goal. And then make them employable, and if they have the time, if they have the resources to go beyond that, then we'll help them do that. But our first goal is to give them the minimum level of skills necessary to get a job.
The school district in my hometown is already doing this. Are other school districts doing this? And what is the higher ed coordinating board's role in oversighting that?
Well, the role that we have is that because community colleges are open admissions,
right,
they get an awful lot of students who need basic skills.
Yeah.
So it's one of the functions of community colleges to work with this population. And while it's true that a lot of school districts, and in fact the Texas Workforce Commission has programs of this type, there's such a huge need that actually TEA and the TWC and the coordinating board need to work together as widely as possible. There was a bill that was submitted this last legislative session to move adult basic education from TEA to the coordinating board. We did not support the bill because we said the issue is not where the program is housed. The issue is whether you get these 3 state agencies to work effectively together to meet the greatest possible need. And that's what we've been focusing on. But this effort is absolutely critical.
Commissioner, I think it's a worthwhile project. I think it has a great need. But I am wondering, is it far-reaching or overreaching for a Texas Higher Education Commission? Is that not something that TEA or local school districts should be doing it?
Well, there are different schools of thought, and if you break down the evidence, it's about 50-50 either way. Some people argue that most of these people that need adult basic skills are adults. They're not comfortable going to high schools. They're not comfortable taking programs in high schools. They'd rather be in an environment where they feel that it's more adult focused, so they would prefer to go to a program at a regional workforce development site or take a program at a community college. There are other factors, eligibility for financial aid and so forth, that have to be taken into consideration.
So in the instance of my school district, my hometown school district, they have a separate campus for this. How are they funding that? Are there funds coming from the state, from the federal level?
Beaumont.
What's
Beaumont?
I don't know about whether they have whether they are one of the 55 federally funded adult ed providers. They may be. I don't know. I don't have a list of those those 55 in front of me. But Beaumont ISD may be one of those federally funded adult basic ed providers that are managed at TEA.
Okay.
And I think that just to add to Commissioner Paredes' words, I think that one of the advantages of having these programs at the community college is because they are integrated with workforce training. And at an ISD, oftentimes there may not be, unless it's with an it's with a student who may be already part of K-12, or that individual is enrolled in a public school, and they may have integrated skills and technical support classes. But the advantage is that there may be adult basic ed students at the community college who can then be concurrently enrolled with a technical program like welding or certified nurse assistant or something like that, and a support class with a basic skills support class that can bring them up to 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade reading.
So you were...
I'm sorry, go ahead. No.
So you were saying that, the lose-lose is when the unprepared adult student enters these open enrollment community colleges and just they fail and they tie up resources. Could there not be a requirement that they take some type of testing to measure where they're at and determine that they're really ready to be in that open enrollment?
Well, that's not the problem. The problem is not whether they gain admission to the institution. The challenge is whether the community colleges has programs available to the students that meet their needs. The problem is that the community colleges were never developed or never intended to help students at such a low level of literacy and computational skill. The assumption was always that the people who would go to community colleges would be within a reasonable degree of readiness for college-level work. That's no longer the case.
That is the purpose and the use of this funding, is to help separate and to create programs that can be provided so that these individuals who are going that career technical track can get the basic and necessary skills, including the testing. That's the other scenario, is how do we test them so that we really know who the population is, and then how do we provide that programming. So that's why programs have been funded, not only to look at that placement scenario, but also that programming scenario, because the population is not going to get smaller, it's going to get bigger.
Related to our previous discussion, part of what we're going to consider in a new assessment is how do you identify the adult basic ed students, because right now the developmental ed test essentially has a floor. And below that, at that floor, you don't know if the student is really well served by developmental ed or should they be in adult basic ed. But right now, those students are essentially being put in classes which don't serve them. So regardless of where they're served, whether it's at community colleges or elsewhere, we need to be able to identify those students that aren't going to be served, and the state dollars spent on them in developmental ed classes are not going to be helpful to them. So, I mean, that is a basic consideration, and right now, because of an unknown number of adult basic ed students embedded in developmental ed, we don't even fully understand how successful our developmental ed programs are. So they may be slightly more successful than we think, simply because some schools will have more of these adults embedded in their programs, but we need to address them and at least identify, and what we've talked about in our developmental ed pilot projects is when we identify them, they need to be served wherever that might be, whether it's at the community college, out in the community somewhere at a high school. That really is going to have to be addressed, but this is important as we go forward to address the needs of these folks and at least get them, as the Commissioner has said many times, into at least an initial workforce job. Maybe later on they'll come back to higher ed, or at least they'll be better prepared to help their own children as they move forward.
Thank you. Have there been any projection done that how many of these students that will attend this program will go on and do the next level, whether at the community college or technical school?
Not yet. I have some anecdotal numbers, very small. Like I know that at Texas State Technical College, there were 16 students in a phlebotomy course, and all of them were under 8th grade reading. They were actually around 5th and 6th grade, and they all graduated. They took the national exam with phlebotomy. They all passed but one. 15 of them passed. I know that 9 of those students chose to go on to EMT, and so the grant is supporting them and giving them extra support because they're still at this they're testing at about the 7.5 or 7th grade level, so they're going to continue to support them, but they went into an EMT program, and I just got an email yesterday saying that those students in that EMT program are doing much, much better than all the regularly admitted students. So, but this is all anecdotal. The programs have not been evaluated yet. The evaluation team just got on board this fall, so
That's a good information.
that's an example of at least Texas State Technical in Harlingen.
I would like to make a comment. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I've seemed to have read at some point or another that less than 25% of the students that enroll in remedial education in our community colleges today go on to complete one single level, college level course. Am I wrong on that?
I think
Am I accurate on that?
Yeah, I think across both math and reading and writing, that's true. I think the percentage for reading and writing is a little bit higher than that, but for math, it's considerably lower than that. So if you take the average, that number is probably accurate.
Yeah, that's not a very good result.
And that doesn't include all the students who once are told that they've been placed in developmental ed, simply walk off the college campus, never to be seen again.
Okay, any other questions before we move on?
No, but I will make a motion that we approve this request.
Does this require a motion?
Yes, this
Okay, motion's been made. Do I hear a second? David's a second. Do I point of discussion now?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead.
Judy, I had shared with you some comments that I think you can easily incorporate into the RFP, but basically if you look at the next agenda item under the white paper, the CCA,
Yeah.
it was really along the lines of that item 5, that transformative technology and using that. And if we can kind of weave that into the RFP, I think that would be helpful.
And I did speak to Dr. Vale and to Dr. Munoz after I had my discussion with you yesterday, and we will incorporate it.
And I think that's a good idea.
Yes, in fact,
Well, can I point something out just very
Please.
quickly? This particular agenda item is to request funding for the technical assistance for these, potentially in the next 2 years, could be as many as 30 programs that are going to take this, the successful components of the Adult Basic Ed Innovation Grant to scale in the state, or at least as much to scale as possible in the state. And so this technical support that we need, or that I'm hoping to find, is to really find out what's out there nationally. There's a lot of programs out there nationally that are getting a lot of support from different national entities and state entities. The Lumina Foundation, JFF, Meadows, Mott Foundation, all these folks are providing support to these different states to sort of do the very same thing we're trying to do with these Adult Basic Ed Innovation Grants. And I'm trying to figure out, well, is there a way we can get that support to us and to give our programs sort of best practices from around, from our state, but also from what's happening nationally, to kind of direct these programs in a way, instead of just having them just do whatever they want. I want to try and manage them a better way. And that's this technical support. So this group is not necessarily working, whoever this group is not necessarily going to be working directly with students on the ground. They're going to be working with the program implementation. They're going to be working with institutional partners. They're going to be seeing, well, who at the institution do we need to bring in because your program's not moving, or you're not able to, there's a barrier here. Who do we need to bring in to try and get that barrier down so that this program can work? So, I will incorporate that in the RFP, that there's some sort of, I know that there's possibility that there's web meetings that these programs will do with the institutions. It could be that they may incorporate some sort of technology, and I'll write that in the RFP. I haven't finished it yet. But it's a little bit different than what's here with Complete College America, because these are direct service to students. This is, I believe, right? Correct? And this is actually service to staff and faculty. So they could do some of the technical assistance to faculty like that.
Yes,
and provide online services.
And I understand and I appreciate that explanation. I think it would behoove us to ask them to look at benchmarking what's already out there, what's already working, and identify platforms that are free, web-based, readily available. A lot of these people who are stuck in these circumstances with low reading skills, low math skills, a lot of it's a conspiracy of silence. They don't want to come out from the shadow, and if they had that home-based or individual-based, self-paced instruction, maybe they would be able to maintain that air of dignity while they're actually acquiring those skills that would allow them to get entry-level jobs that they very desperately need. And so I think that there is opportunity there, and it would have to be alternate, like the commissioner was saying. You know, people find out they're going to be in one of these programs, and that is just not acceptable to them from their own psyche. You know, it's a shame game. Am I wrong?
No, I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
The only thing I would add is that to the extent that some of these bullet points are used to evaluate the RFPs, is that I would really like to see us heavily weight strategies for achieving scale and sustainability.
Oh, well,
Just
that is a
concentrate.
mandate that we have
That's-
under the legislature, is to move these programs to scale.
I mean, it's kind of in there as one of a set of bullet points, but I think that's
in an
a
important
vital.
place in the RFP that I wrote. It's the very first bullet.
I'm happy now.
Any other questions or comment? I don't think this, I think this is an item of information, is that correct?
Let me also explain, if-
Okay,
Mr.
all right,
Chairman,
we got a motion approval, and then we had discussion. Judy,
I just
you
wanted to
anything
add
say?
that when we follow this entire process, before the proposal is awarded, it will go back to the chair and vice chair of the board, because we don't have the authority ourselves to just award it. It has a process that it has to go through,
This is approval to actually
just to
issue the RFP.
issue the RFP.
Motion's been made and seconded. Do I have a show of hands? All approves, say aye. Raise your hands, all disapprove.
Your votes are you and these two
Okay,
down here.
all right, we all approve. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 4B, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendations to the committee to expand funds awarded to the coordinating board under Complete College America Completion Innovation Challenge, which was funded through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Chair yields to Dr. Gardner for comment.
We've been conferring with our general counsel, and it's our belief that this item comes to you simply for acceptance of the grant. The information here is what has been awarded to us. We do have a board rule which could be construed to say something else as one stretches it, and Bill can address that briefly, but it's our belief that you really need to accept this grant, not actually approve it. And we have no flexibility in terms of the expenditures given the awards process.
Board Rule 1.16B provides that a board committee to which an item is assigned shall approve all requests relating to that item for the purchase of materials or services if the cost for those materials or services is greater than $100,000 but less than or equal to $750,000. And then it goes on to say, after a vendor is selected, a majority of the chair, the vice chair, and the chair of the responsible board committee would approve all aspects of the contract with the selected vendor. Technically, I don't believe this section applies when the coordinating board applies for a Bill and Melinda Gates grant, a Lumina grant, that type of thing. But just to make certain that the board is in agreement with that, David and I thought that we should present this issue to you.
I'm opened up for discussion. Anybody have any
Do we need a
comment?
motion for acceptance, or you're saying?
Well, no, I think that on this issue, I think all we need is a motion to accept the grant as awarded and to treat the expenditures outlined in this item as background that you'll understand what will be done with the funding received from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Accept with gratitude and
I
humility.
move that we approvingly accept this award.
I'll second that very much.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is any discussion on this item?
If I might add, and I know the commissioner may want to add, they have just been to a meeting just recently regarding not just ours but others, and there was 10 grants awarded, and Texas's grant was recognized as one of the best written grants that was submitted. It was a lot of work. Terry Daniels in the back has been instrumental in that, and of course Dr. Tamara Clunas when she was here, but now Dr. Suzanne Morales-Vale will take over with Terry, and of course with the help of Nina's office and Joel, who worked so hard on this proposal. It was countless of hours, so when the commissioner came back to tell us that it was received so favorably, that was quite a good feeling. So we are moving forward, and it, as Dr. Gardner said, is to let you know that this has been awarded, and this is part of the governor's initiative coming to us. So
This Joel is a new grant writer, and his first effort resulted in $1 million in terms of communicating what he learned from other staff. So it's important to recognize
yeah,
that.
he's
Thanks
a
for doing
terrific
that.
grants writer. He really is.
At this point, the motion's been made and seconded. I'll call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that concludes the item agendas for...
That's it.
Well, I am. That's why I'm headed that way. Chair entertains a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second? Somebody speak up. Got to have a second.
I'll second it.
Second motion's been made. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.
I wanted to stay for a while.